Hello, everybody. Welcome to the second National Asian Heritage Month Symposium. This is the First Nations Reflections, where we are right now. And I have Teresa with me, who's a Métis elder, originally from Saskatoon. We're two Toontown sisters, I suppose, because I was born there too. And for those of you who don't know, who weren't aware and did not able to make it yesterday, this is a space specifically for First Nations reflection. So I'm going to pass the floor on to Teresa, and she can guide the session however she'd like to do. The space is totally up to them. And it's only when Teresa asks if anybody has any questions from the audience. At that time, people from the audience can ask questions. However, if there is anybody in the audience who is First Nations, Métis, or Inuit, this floor is for you, so please give your contributions in any way, shape or form you'd like to, or criticism, stories, silence, whatever you prefer. So Teresa, I'm going to pass the floor on to you, but I know that you were telling me something about the shared immigrant story. So I'll leave it to you.
Okay. I was speaking to Farah, saying how the immigrant story is like, in some incidences, just like the Indigenous, when it comes to the different ideas of our value, about the things that we put back into society, the expectations placed upon us, and the judgments placed upon us. So the struggle is there, and anyone who's been around for as long as I do can recognize that. You know, our experiences are the same. Hard to get a job. You know, if we have an accent when we speak different languages, that's like our commented on right away, and it's funny, you know, because those people come here usually speak 2 or 3 languages, you know, and that's, to me, that's always like an extra when it comes to, you know, the thought process. They often suffer from poverty, you know. So it's all the same, and the work we do to bring the education back to the forefront is there's a lot of activists, whether you're immigrant or Indigenous, we all try and work to do better. So just to let you know who I am, I'm Métis from Saskatchewan, and I was invited by Martin to participate in this program, and thank you, Martin. That's awesome of you. He's there. You see the old guy with the glasses? That's him. So I'll just start off with that, and you guys can join in. I don't know. Martin?
I'm so sorry, Martin, we can't hear your sound. You're off mute, but maybe you can unplug your headset.
Anything yet? Yeah, all right. Okay. Someone say something?
Yeah,
I can't.
Good.
Yeah, there. All right. So who is here? Teresa, you there? Farah?
Mm-hmm. I know that Beverly Nan is trying to connect with the audio, so we're just waiting for that audio to connect, and then we have some participants as well.
All right. All right. So I listened in a while ago. I caught a little bit of it. Unfortunately, I had to rush off. But I heard this morning. I heard the Rwandan lady. She was really quite good. I really it rang a bell. Everything that she talked about was right on for sure. I think it's things that people think about in the arts, and especially when you're talking about communities, and then even like being responsible to communities, and kind of like interpreting, reinterpreting, telling stories, and then the power of those stories to resonate with yourself and your family and your surrounding, and then also the broader community.
And we've got Ozo here as well, connecting to the audio. So just for Teresa and Martin, in case you can't see them, they are there, and they're just connecting up.
Hello, everybody.
So Martin, just before you got on board, I was telling the audience who is here that this space is for you all. So you can take the space however you want to. So whatever you would like to express to us or not express or share with us or not share, you're more than welcome to do that.
Okay. Well, I mean, to start, maybe I'll introduce myself. My name is, well, okay. Awatwan horado zawagwego, danuskana zawagwego, aguranoro, nwaksanoda, ne ganyakahaga, najatodo, guakiga, ne guanurunkwa zawagwego, danuskana zawagwego. So, greetings, everyone. My name is Martin Loft. Hello. Some nice artwork up there. That Pauline's? Oizogo, is that yours?
Yes, that is.
Very good. So, my name is Martin Loft, as my English name, and of course, my Mohawk name is Aguirdanordo. Aguirdanordo means a precious tree. My mother used to joke to me and said, "You are an expensive tree." I always got a kick out of that. But so I was born in Kahnawake at the local hospital, and I've been an artist, I guess, as long as I can remember. Someone who kind of like dreamed about creating art and doing art. And I started out as a photographer, and I did some printmaking in school. I did cinema and photography. Since then, I've kind of I've done crafts. I've done feather work, leather work. I dabbled in jewelry and silversmithing, working with wampum belts, wampum shells, making jewelry and so on. I've kind of been active in many of those areas. I worked at our cultural center in Kahnawake for 28 years. And I worked alongside of Oizogo. She was on our board for many of those years, and I enjoyed myself. Presently, I'm doing artwork, and I'm working with a studio in the city called Metis, Atelier d'Art Metis, where I have a small studio and where we teach as well. I teach relief printing and a little bit of screen printing, and I practice that as well. I think Oizogu said the other day that she does different art genres, let's say, disciplines, and I'm the same. I'm in the same bent that I will do ceramics for a while, and I'll go back to photography for a while, and I'll do printmaking for a while, and I kind of jump all over the place. And I think Oizogo mentioned that she might be ADD, so I might be ADD too. So I kind of like have a very strong, passionate interest in some art forms for a period, and while I'm doing it, I'm kind of like single-minded there, and then all of a sudden I change gears and I do other things that interest me. But that's how you keep, in my mind anyway, that you keep fresh, you keep wanting to learn things, and you know the things that and the areas that you want to pursue, and these are the things that I think that keep you kind of like in the thick of it, changing, modifying, honing your skills and so on. I recently did a mentorship program with a young artist from, he originally started out on the prairies and ended up in BC. And then in the last couple of years, he's been in Montreal. So I worked with him, working with him on creating our studio. So we had a little studio going. We did some fundraising, all in the hopes of offering him some direction and also some basics in creating artwork and then marketing it and selling it and so on, and trying to get his emerging art career off the ground. For a young fellow, I think he did a very good job, and he's a very good self-starter, and he's someone I think in a very short while he'll be making some making some great art.
And he did say he was from the prairies. Just
Yeah,
so.
that's right. Yeah, that's right. His name is Jackson Coys. Teresa, you might know his father, possibly Greg Coys, he's a Métis filmmaker and who's done well, not all his films on Métis culture, but he's explored quite well the Métis singing and jigging and crafts and canoeing and a number of these things that are, of course, important to the folks in the prairies and the Métis people and in that area. But also, he also does films focusing on Indigenous issues in general. So it's it's something that I think it's in his family. So sometimes I think even that we take it for granted. Sometimes in some cases there are families full of artists. Sometimes an artist just springs up from a family where they have no artistic, creative traditions. But what I find though, like working with Aboriginal or Indigenous artists and being in that milieu kind of deal, sometimes I think that it's like the authenticity comes from who you are. It's kind of like you hear so many stories of, for instance, Mohawk artists, craftspeople, carvers, that sort of thing. So I've heard so many stories, like iron workers, for instance, who've had very little artistic training, very little, experience, get hurt on the job, for instance, and then all of a sudden have time on their hands and start whittling, with a knife and a piece of wood and start creating like incredible pieces of art. And then, kind of move on to do carvings in stone or that sort of thing. And this artistic, creative spirit, I think, kind of like just moves through them, and is like manifested in their hands and their eyes, their brain, of course, and kind of like put it into that art form and create great stuff. That's it's kind of I think in Quebec they call them patrimonial arts. So it's a part of like the culture, that is kind of like part of the things that they do. And I think that in a lot of ways, our artists and our craftspeople have that same thing, where they know what looks right. Like if beadwork looks fake or it doesn't look right, it's like you can catch it right away. But I think if they are grounded in their culture and in their traditions and their histories and their history, I think they're able to take that and naturally put it into their art. And it is it's authentic in the sense that it rings true, like it's real. It's not someone faking carving a totem pole, for instance, and whatever. But I find that people can really make that real, and even have like a rebirth. I had a discussion online, again, of course, many of my discussions are online these days with Facebook and Instagram about traditional dress, where in various times in our histories, we've gone, and today it happens where, you get people who don't come from, say, for instance, a powwow tradition, like Plains Indian, big drum, doing all of the dances and so on that are particular to a powwow. And they take it and they make it their own. They become like, accustomed to it, and it kind of like, they kind of adopt it, it adopts them, but with some communities, they kind of like almost in a sense, and my feeling is it's like they abandon their true stuff that makes them particularly Wendat or Abenaki or even Mi'kmaq sometimes, and when they do the research or when they look to their elders or they visit museums and museum collections and find crafts or, for instance, with the Wendat, there are items that came back from museums in Russia, in England and France, and they end up and people find them. It's like, wow, the degree of artistic sophistication that is embedded in these crafts, unleashed in the communities, can have like a powerful impact, like almost like a rebirth of their traditions. And there was a quote that I've seen many Innu quotes and Atikamekw quotes and so on. And the other day I saw I don't want to call it buckskin, but it was a caribou hide, but a soft white tanned hide with porcupine quill, moose hair, and beadwork design, and absolutely like fantastic. And the question I asked, online, of course, was, are there any people in the Wendat community, the Huron community, that are making these things today? Hello? Am I going on too much here?
No, I think that Ozogo is testing her sound.
Oh, okay, yeah. So what I wanted to say was that, even though, there are crafts that are in a sense on the brink of extinction, that no one knows, no one is presently doing it. No one knows the technology to do it. They've lost that connection to the materials. Maybe there are no caribou close to the communities anymore, or they're not trading with people that hunted and tanned caribou. People can still go and investigate and make those crafts real again. It can be almost like a rebirth. And that enough people, when you have a critical mass of people, doing a certain type of craft or art form, a traditional art form, it's like contagious, and it catches on, and people get excited about it. And what I shared with people was, my experience with traditional Ganyagahaga or Mohawk moccasins, for instance. At one time, people in Kahnawake were renowned, and many of the museums have beautiful examples of moccasins. In the late mid 80s and get to like the 89s, there were fewer and fewer people making them. There were fewer people doing them, and there was almost like a very thin thread that was connecting us to this this traditional craft and traditional art form. And surprisingly, say museum collections have a bad reputation, or have a reputation, let's say, of kind of pillaging indigenous communities for artifacts. It was common. In some cases they were confiscated, like the great potlatch collections in the West and so on, when traditions were outlawed, and some things were purchased, and some things were donated, and all these sorts of things. But the fact is, however they got them, like today, this very minute, there are collections of very rare crafts in museums spread out all over the world, and even like locally, like in Montreal, Toronto, Ottawa, what have you. And it is comforting to know that, museums have indigenized, in the sense that they have brought on staff members and people who are in decision-making roles into museums, and have that sensitivity and almost like a not an obligation, but they owe something to communities, you know, that they have these items, they have these collections, and that, you know, people from communities, craftspeople, you know, should have, like, maybe in some cases they should have the items back. Say many, in most cases, the museum items, you know, should be with the communities. But before that happens, you know, they should definitely have access to their collections, you know, and that, you know, craftspeople and researchers from the community should have an ability, you know, with I guess some notice, to be able to go back into those museums collections and to research them. Well, with the situation with moccasins, for instance, there are very few people making them, and some of the rarest forms of these art forms were in museums, and people were able to go and study them and photograph them and draw them, and, you know, look under the hood, you know, look where the seams had ripped and the whatever, and discover or rediscover what people were doing, and then almost recreated and re-established the production, the making of these items. And what's amazing now is that you know, that the quality and even the number of people who are making, say, moccasins, for instance, like in Kahnawake and Akwesasne, Six Nations, I would say are, you know, from maybe a handful to like dozens of people. And the quality of the moccasins, I'd say, are as good as what they made 100 years ago. And in some cases, the artists have even gone beyond, you know, they've surpassed what, you know, they were doing before, you know, so it's really quite, you know, it's gratifying, and it's great to see these things happen. And Gabe, I know you're there, I can see you.
Yeah, right here.
The same thing, I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about language, but the same thing with language, you know, that, you know, say 30 years ago when I was a young person, or 40 years ago when I was a young person, you know, my generation was in that area where, you know, our parents didn't speak to us because they thought they were doing us a favor. You know, the government was, you know, instituting these rules in the Indian day schools that prevented us from using the languages, you know, so there was a gap there that could have been like the death blow to the language, to our language, the Mohawk language, Kanien'keha. But measures were taken in education. People got control of the education system, and were able to institute, you know, measures that helped preserve the language, enrich the language, and perpetuate it, and created immersion programs for children, and then, you know, in the last 10 years or so for adults. And I mean, I'm not a speaker. I mean, I'm a student. I tried my college best. I gave it the old college try to learn, but you know, I have a limited mastery of the language. But it is really amazing to see some young people, you know, who have, like, you know, beyond all, you know, call, beyond all expectations. I don't know. They've been able to revive it within themselves and in their families, and, you know, are carrying on a tradition, and are speaking the language. So it can happen.
There's been a lot of changes, I'd say, within the last 40 years for Indigenous people. You know, like my nation, after they kicked us out of Rupertson and killed Riel, we were left on the side of the road, and nobody wanted to admit they were Métis. They quit speaking the language, they quit doing the art, they quit doing the fur trade, because they couldn't, you know, they killed all the buffalo and everything. So you're right, our languages we were prevented from speaking our language because of the impact the colonial people, you know, and that was for our arts too. It wasn't until 1978 before we could even practice our cultural arts. Like, you know, they banned us from doing it. You know, I can remember when I moved out east, it was like everybody went to work because you can get paid and you can get money from that. I'm not saying had the best jobs, but there were a lot of people not doing the art, you know. That's something I've seen revived over the last 30 years here. You know, so that's recent, right? So
There's a lot of things that have changed too over the years, like not just in arts and crafts and language. With relearning, there's not as many elderly people who have the original language, so the newer generation speak what I guess the older people would call a broken language. Yeah, so that's hard, but everything that what was making us who we are was outlawed. Whether it was dressing, doing craft work, doing ceremony, all of that was illegal. And if you got caught doing anything like that, you were taken to the RCMPs, you know, they would come and get you. And that was their whole thing about getting control of the Indian problem, you know, and it's something that we live through, and there's a lot of, I would call cellular damage that was done, where you don't have to experience it yourself. Somehow, because of genetics, it's right in your genetics now, where kids don't understand why they don't like a certain thing, and it all has to do with the way that our peoples were treated. I mean, even today, you know, there's misconceptions out there about a lot of different things. Like non-native people think that we are supported through their tax dollars, and that's like not true at all. All the monies that get sent to reserves comes from a very small portion of what's actually owed to us. They owe trillions of dollars to First Nations, and they have it in a repository somewhere. And they only trickle feed us enough to allow us to survive. But they comes from energy, mines, and resources. So all of the things that the land has and all of the resources of the land is what they take, they sell, they get money for it, and the portion was supposed to go back to First Nations. And you still see today where there's expropriations happening all over Canada and the US, where they decide that they want that resource or that piece of land for whatever, and next day they're moving out the people, you know, relocation they call it. But that's, again, is for the energy and resources that are in the lands. So it still goes on today. And so it's really hard to, even for myself, I have a difficult time with Mohawk language. I understand it, but I have a hard time to speak it because my mother and father didn't speak it to us, to like my siblings. It was to protect us so that we wouldn't get in trouble when we went to school. And there was a lot of different things that happened, like at school, that were atrocious to the people. I mean, today, if you heard that a school had a death rate, you would be like, what do you mean the school had a death rate? But a lot of the First Nation schools had 50% death rate. So imagine that. Somebody comes to your house and takes your children away, and then they never come home. They're gone.
They called it a mortality rate. But those are the residential schools. That's what they had, was a mortality rate of 50%. You send 800 students to the school. Well, there was roughly 400 that graduated years later. you know, and that's just the way it was. And people accepted that. And so that's something that we should have never done.
Well, there were some families that wanted their kids back and actually went and got their kids, but then that family would be starved for the rations they were supposed to be getting. They would quit giving them their rations until finally the family, well, okay, put the kids back, right? Not all the time, but sometimes, you know, and there are a lot of kids who died and were buried in holes, mass graves. And nobody knew what happened to the kids. You know, the stories are just atrocious when you think of all the abuses that were laid upon Indigenous people that today's societies don't understand or deny. Like when they talked about the Native women who during the time I was a kid were put in the hospitals and the chances of having babies was taken away. It just went to court, I think it was 3-4 years ago. People start bringing it up and people are going, oh, that's a bunch of BS. No, that happened, you know? So there's a lot of things that our people will suffer on what this lady said, Awisco, with that generational trauma. It's in our genes when we're born. Our mothers and fathers may not have said it, but we felt it. And so sometimes we get confused when we're an adult because we don't know, we don't understand where it comes from because nobody talked about before. You know,
even today it's still hidden. There's a lot of things that they don't talk about, like with the residential schools.
Too painful.
Yeah, it's too painful for people. I did a painting that's actually at the Cultural Center here in Ganawage about my take on the effects of the residential school. And what I did is all in the background, there's hundreds of faces of people, children dressed in the old style clothes with the white shirt and the blue uniform that we had to wear. And I have an empty desk there in the front where you can see it. But the reason I put the empty desk there was because there was always room for one more. Because when they would lose somebody, they'd go find another child and bring that child into the system. And in the painting, there's a grandfather dressed in traditional wear and a mother and a sister. And then there's one little girl that's dressed in her blue and white uniform being held by the grandfather. And I did that because no matter how hard they tried to extinguish us as a people and not recognize us as a people, we have always maintained our belief system that never really went away. It went underground and we hid it because we knew that at some point we would be able to revitalize that and to have the kids learn more and give them back what was taken from us. You know, it's terrible when you refuse to allow a person to have their culture. Culture is so important. It's who you are. You can be a human being and be completely different to the person next to you because of your culture and your ceremony and the things that you do together as a family and as a community and as even racial. There's things that we do that are totally different from others. Yes, we're all human beings and we're spirit first, but how we do our spirituality, what makes us stronger, because it is not just the things that I learned, the things I know that I teach my grandkids or taught my children about. It's what my great that didn't get lost. and things that you can learn how to retrieve. Because we had oral history, non-native governments don't recognize our history. It's just storytelling according to them. It's a myth. But it is our history. And because we didn't have a written language doesn't mean that it didn't exist or it's not true. You know, and when you write history for another people, you say whatever you want. And that's how they come up with all these theories of who we are and where we came from. But again, they are still theory only. They're not actually basis in 100% fact, because all of the facts of things that were real, they have hidden, buried, and destroyed. I went a couple of years ago to a place that's way out, hidden remotely, and it's a place that has this huge white crystal rock, and it's full of hieroglyphs that are chiseled, like tapped in, so you can see the images. On there is our creation story. It tells how we got here. It talks about our grandfathers. All of our stories have images that we relate to it and higher level thinking, and that's in there. That's on that white stone. And so the government took it, put a building on top of it, and poured concrete over more than 3/4 of it. So that's gone forever. Imagine today, in this day and age, that they would do that to prove that we were not here. You know, that's like really sad.
And that's their whole thing of getting rid of the Indian, right? So they never have to come up and add to the plate instead of just taken away. And that's why religion was placed on every nation that they came across, because I'm sorry, I don't know if anyone's religious, but religion is the best way to divide and punish, and saying it's God who's doing it. No, man made the religion. It's his interpretation. And our spirituality is built on being and our connection to everything in life, you know? And that's the only thing that saves us. You're absolutely right, is our spirituality, you know? In my opinion, because, you know, because I just like to say that.
That's true.
It's amazing that there's a lot of things that we have similar also with Asian culture. Even though we don't come from there, there's things that the natural peoples of the earth always followed. Like we follow the stars, we follow the moon, we set our ceremonies by that. We're not just like the more common one today, New Year's is January 1st. Yes, for some people, but not for me. I don't feel that that's even an appropriate thing to have, because their idea of celebrating January 1st is to go out, buy some booze and get hammered. You know, like that's terrible. We both don't drink, we don't smoke, we don't do drugs. We're try to live as the way that what would make our ancestors proud and what lays out the groundwork for our grandkids. So that's why we don't do that. And most of the people that we know, like people that we hang around with and develop relationships with, choice of friends, none of them drink, none of them smoke. Well, I have one friend that smokes occasionally, but he always says, it's because I'm burning tobacco for the Creator. And that's the tobacco he has, so yeah.
A good one to follow that is the Thanksgiving holiday, right? Like everybody else is celebrating, but it was the worst thing that happened to us, you know, and that history was never shared. People start becoming aware of that maybe, I'd say 10 years, you know, and start coming out the truth about what Thanksgiving was, you know, and Christmas, that's religious. You know, it was not our way, you know, and then that's where they go, those Indians are all a bunch of savages. They don't believe in God. You know, there's always a tool that that 80% of society accepts that belittles another minority, you know?
And you know, the thing is, people call the higher level being that people talk about, call God, Jesus, Buddha, Jehovah, we call him creator. So we believe in that higher level of spiritual beings that helped us and put us in a place where we were supposed to be. So like we have, if you take a look at the medicine wheel, Doni Dogo was going to talk about that yesterday, about how in the medicine wheel you have the white, the yellow, you have the red and the black, and that is like all of the races. So whichever direction that you're taking a look, as far east as we go from here, we're going to hit white people. If we go west, we're going to hit the Oriental people, which people call the yellow people. South, it's the black people or brown people. And then you have the Native American that we call the red people. So the reason I was talking about the medicine wheel and taking a look at cultures is because we all got our own original instructions by our creator or God or whoever, and the rules are pretty much the same. It's always to live your existence in a good way, to always try to be in a good place. And when you're giving things, you give from the heart. So, for example, somebody doesn't have food, so you bring them food. Or if somebody needs help with something and they don't have anybody to do that for them, then it's your obligation as a human being to do that, you know. And there's no ownership of people. Nobody owns anybody else. And people who have tried to own somebody, it's always turned out horrible. You know, like you look at the Black Lives Matter today, that's all stemming from people who were stolen and brought to North America and enslaved. And did the same thing, Native people here, took them and brought them overseas to the United Kingdom area and Spain and wherever out there. And today you have, I just saw in the news last week that there's a very remote tribe in South America, south of Brazil. And missionaries just went there to go to see how the people are doing with this COVID. I mean, nobody's ever been to their place that they live. And now you have somebody going there to peddle their belief system. It's terrible.
And their disease.
And their disease, yes. Because when you're that remote, you don't have the same antibodies and ability to fight off whatever is coming. So those kind of things are horrendous for it to still be happening today.
It's like the colonial mind never learns from history. Because, like, you know, if we look at their history, everything brought disaster to someone they considered of less value. You know, it's such a shame that they can't learn just to be. They always have to conquer something. They always have to dig something for greed. They always have to label something. They always have to judge something. It's for their own sense of power. Even now, look at our government. There's only a few people in government, but they manage to control everybody. Indigenous, immigrants, people from that call themselves Canadian or American. Just, you know, when you sit and you think with this thought that there is only a few people running the world, it's all built on that warped sense of power and strength, and they manipulate us with everything. with our histories, with our color, with our nationalities, with our language, with our sense of whether we're atheists, spiritualists, or religious. Everything is made to divide, you know, our youth, our age, you know, and Native people, as Indigenous people, we're not like that.
It's a, I was going to say is it's important to take a look at where do we go from here. You know, we need to bring more more communication with other peoples, like with the Asian peoples. We don't know too much about them. I, like myself, I know that they also have plant systems, and they have places where there's a lot of people who still live in traditional way, and
Well, they celebrate their New Year at the same time as we do when we celebrate our midwinter. We have our midwinter, they have their New Year, and it's on the same day. And it's been for years, you know. So that's one tie that we have with the Chinese, is that.
Well, you guys on Ganawagi have done quite a few things with the Asian people. I remember twice where they came and they had a parade in town.
Mhm.
So you guys, and I think some people actually have reached out to an organization in Chinatown to share things with. So, you know, Ganawagi is always the front runners in most everything. So.
Yeah, years ago, Madam Lee from, she had a restaurant in St. Catherine, Côte St. Catherine, and one in Saint Sever. She came to the community and she organized a number of things in the community as well as in Chinatown, and she had plans to bring a group to China, to tour China and so on. She said that there was quite a demand in China and an interest in what was happening here with Indigenous people in Canada and the US. But like some things, you know, like they happen right off the bat, and sometimes they take a long time. And I think that this is an example of something that is probably just in the developing, it's still developing, but you know, eventually, you know, I think that things will be renewed, and you know, there very well may be some sort of an allyship between Asian people from that vast area and Indigenous people here in Canada and the US. What always surprises me, and you learn stuff like this morning, I learned about a woman was talking about Rwanda and some of the activities that happen there, and some of their traditions and some of their storytelling. And their storytelling and our storytelling, I think they're not the same, but they share a lot of elements, in the sense that sometimes it's not just an entertaining tale, you know, an entertaining story. Sometimes it is entertaining. Sometimes it can be scary. Sometimes they can be amazing. They can be, you know, like, oh, this, that, whatever. But I think more times than not, in my feeling, my experience, is that they're like tales to teach us. You know, they teach us stuff that make it, you know, clear. You know, this is how we treat the earth. You know, this is how we look at the world. This is how, you know, medicines come to us. They speak to us, and how we interact with them, and all of these things. You know, so I recall her saying, you know, telling her stories this morning to her son, you know, about how she is related to, you know, her parents, and then her grandparents, and she named them, and she could go back 23 generations to, you know, incredible sweep of history, you know, that spans like 400 years. Like and when I was listening to it, I was thinking about like a tree, you know, like an ancient, you know, 500-year-old tree that is standing there, that is rooted, that is growing, you know, and that, you know, people, when we see it, they go, wow, look at that tree. But that tree has seen stuff, you know, it's seen the world, it's seen, you know, and even on a, like a, again, Wizogo was talking about that, that genetic memory, you know, the memory of, you know, the ages, of the seasons, of volcanoes, of all these things are in the rings, you know, they're in the rings of the growth rings. You know, some years it was perfect conditions and it grew. And some years it was a drought and it had this, and they're all part of that tree, all part of the story. And it's like us, you know, we're like, you know, like the trees, we're the face of, you know, of colonization, of, you know, of this earth and of this part of the world. And it's unique.
I just wanted to, we only have about a minute left. Just wanted to end with a part that we need to really consider and think about. There's not that many Native people left in Turtle Island. And when you take a look at endangered species of animals, if we were endangered, like we are endangered, for Mohawks, there's only about 50,000 Mohawks in the whole world. In the whole world, 50,000. If we were bugs, the governments would try everything and people would try everything to help us to survive and to maintain our culture and relearn our culture. They would do everything to help us. But it's not like that today. But it's something that we could strive for, is to try to make culture a priority for all of our children and for all of the people within Turtle Island. Like, I would like to see one day a massive, massive gathering of all First Nations so that we could celebrate who we are and to talk openly about what a wonderful, rich culture that we have and how we are really, truly loving, giving, and sharing people.
I would like to share.
So sorry, Madhu. I'm so sorry, but we're out of time, and this space, we wanted to keep it specifically for First Nations folks of Métis and also First Nations as well as Inuit descent. And only if they gave permission for us to speak would we do so. But unfortunately, I do have to cut this conversation short just because technology will cut us off, and I don't want this conversation to be cut off in the middle. But I know that there are many people who have many questions that they have, things that they'd like to share, and hopefully one day we can actually have this gathering where we can share across culture. Now, for those of you who are panelists out there, thank you very much for attending, and thank you very much for your thoughts and your sharings for today. For those of you who are participants, we're back again tomorrow. We're going to be giving all of the summaries of what happened in all of the breakout spaces across all the provinces, and also we'll be deciding some of the working groups. Tomorrow, we'll be meeting with the First Nations Reflections at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. So for those of you who are interested in coming back to continue this conversation, we'll be meeting 4 p.m. Eastern Time. And Duanidoga is also going to do our closing ceremonies tomorrow at the end of that First Nations reflection. And then we'll go straight into our online cabaret. And for those of you who haven't signed up already for the online cabaret, including the First Nations elders who are here, if you have something that you would like to share, we'd love to include you in that as well. So thank you very much once again.
Thanks very much, folks.
Pleasure. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.